Hello and welcome to Ideas with Diana on July 18th, 2022. In Racine, Wisconsin today it's about 86 degrees. So about um, let's see, about 23 degrees Celsius. I've seen on the CBS News reports that in London it's 104 degrees. They had a red heat emergency for people, and in France, basically pretty much the same thing as well as wildfires in France and Spain. What does this mean? Well, this means climate change is real. However, though, we can't think of solutions in the old 2D world. The old 2D world was basically similar to the Renaissance before perspective was discovered in painting. In the 2D world, everything was appeared as flat. Basically, you could think of our face as a cubus, like this, that. But there's no such thing as this, the arc, where you have the arc and you have shading, as you see like now with the computer camera. So in the old 2D world, basically everything was basically from basically just two points of view. One person would look and see, well, okay, I see a wall, I see posters on the wall, and the point is basically it was just there wasn't any perspective. So basically, what did that mean? Well, I meant that basically when you look at paintings before the Renaissance, you'll notice that the flat, they're almost sort of like sometimes the way cartoons might look. But then after the Renaissance, when you look at Botticelli and Da Vinci and others, you'll notice the additional perspective of focusing, depending on where it is in the painting, and other things. And you can see some books I have behind me about Latin American paintings. One is showing on the cover of Frida Kahlo. Another one is basically from the San Francisco College of Fashion. Another one's a book on Madonna, and then interior design. Well, now, what do I mean when I say comparison of the 2D world versus the 3D world? Well, prior to basically February 24th in the West, many things were thought of as a 2D world. Basically, there's NATO, there's Europe, and the United States, and that formed the 2D perspective. And basically, so everything was seen through this single 2D lens, basically, and thought of in 2D. Even climate change. There's a conference in January of this year in Scotland where many people signed the treaty, and they signed basically that, well, we're going to do this climate change. We're going to eliminate our nuclear power plants. We're going to eliminate our coal plants. Like Germany had 17 power plants, and now they're down to 3, but now they're back to restarting them and reclassifying them as green, which is a good move, as well as also classifying coal plants with scrubbers as a good move. Although some of the aggressive green people are going to be mad or something like that. Here's what the problem is. Through the 2D perspective, green is great. I mean, basically, we eliminate pollution, we make a better world, we stop climate change, we stop the 2 degrees rise in Celsius. However, just like in the Renaissance, before the Renaissance, people realized the 2D perspective wasn't working. When they discovered perspective, they also discovered other ways of thinking, and they realized, well, there's something wrong with this picture where we argue about how many angels can fit on a pinhead. And it became more towards, well, what about applying the invention of zero? So instead of always having to say nil, that actually zero is part of our computation, borrowing from the Arabic world in about 1400 AD. And also, what about setting things as basically applying a calendar that's actually accurate to actually how our world goes, that we actually have 365 and a quarter days, and that we don't actually have 28 days per month as per the lunar calendar. Well, this is what's happening now. When you think about this, For example, I watch the foreign news quite a bit, RT, Deutsche Welle, France 24, BBC, and I observe. And some of the things that I observe, especially when I watch RT, I've shared the link with friends of mine who live in Evanston and along Northwestern University, and they admit that one friend actually wrote back saying, well, he watched Crosstalk and Worlds Apart and said, well, boys, this is a more intelligent conversation than what I see on Morning Joe. And I used to watch Morning Joe quite a bit, but sometimes I get concerned because when Trump was in office, it was all this side. There's never a single Republican who could present a different point of view in the discussion. It's always this side. And that's why I stopped watching, because basically, again, this is the 2D perspective. One side basically has all the knowledge, one side has all the analysis, one side has this. This other side, well, you're invisible. You're here, but we don't see you. We don't hear you. And also you got a muzzle over your mouth so you can't speak. You got blinders so you can't see. So what happens now? Now we're getting to a world where we have multiple perspectives. We have the 2D perspective. Now we have the other perspectives. I'll call it greater than 3D, the foreign press, other things, RT, other things. And the thing is, when one of the what I refer to sometimes jokingly as the four leaders or the code heads of Europe commented in their blog, well, why are we losing the narrative? Okay, let's see if I have anything. Let's see. Well, I'll just use my hand. Like Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy, bang the locks together, bang the locks together, bang the locks together. But the problem is, it's more than just, I guess I'm going to have to say it because same banging the locks together, some people haven't figured it out yet. So, all right, well, I'll say it. Here's the reason why you're losing the narrative. The reason why you're losing the narrative, if your narrative was so great, why has RT's audience has increased 4 times since this change from 2D perspective in policy thinking to multi-D perspective in policy thinking? Why has it increased 4 times? And what happens when people look at the war news? Why do people see on RT that basically some of the actual effects of the war news? Like, for example, this morning on RT, there's a thing where a reporter was in a Ukraine area in the Donbass, and they were interviewing a Ukraine soldier who had surrendered, and he actually surrendered in civilian clothes. And what happens is that's real strange, because basically most soldiers would rather surrender in the uniform because for fear of not getting Geneva Convention protection. So they asked him, why did you surrender civilian? Well, because basically I'm from this area and I wanted to stay in this area, and I don't want to be shot from leaving my unit. And the next question was, well, why couldn't you leave your unit sooner? Because if my unit was still there, I would have been shot trying to leave the unit, so being shot by friendly fire. The third question was, why did you surrender now? Because most of my unit retreated, and they left us behind. So what happened was we had to make a decision: do we surrender as soldiers, or do we surrender hoping to reintegrate into a civilian lifestyle that in the area where we live now in the Donbass? So this shows basically an ongoing thing. There are more soldiers that are actually retreating and taking off the uniforms and going to civilian clothes and surrendering. Now, the thing is, what's interesting also about RT in their broadcast too is they've been having reporters who have been on the front lines reporting from the front lines, like we used to do in the United States during Vietnam and even during the Gulf War, but during the first Gulf War, Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. But now when I watch CBS, ABC, NBC, I don't see any reports from the front lines. I see a lot of reports from the safe backfields of Kyiv and Lviv and Poland, and I don't see anyone on the front lines wearing a press or actually going on the front lines actually where the But when you see the frontline reports, you actually see some of the things that are going on that aren't being followed. I mean, some of the Geneva War Convention rules aren't being followed. Leaf landmines. Um, when the Ukraine troops retreat, they leave a lot of munitions behind. Basically, a lot of munitions going back on the black market. But even today, there's a change based on news report that when people listen to news report, two things. First, there's a thing about where the English were using white phosphorus in Kenya for battlefield practice. And white phosphorus for battlefield practice is banned by international convention because of the effect of how it hurts civilians. After RT published a report two days later, the UK published in a news article that they had stopped using white phosphorus. Amazing. A second thing, what happened today, what I saw is during the early days of this conflict, many civilians in the Donbass, basically, even like when the Russians and Ukrainians agreed that they should wear like this white badge, white tape or something on their arm so they wouldn't get shot at. The Russian troops honored that and didn't shoot at the civilians, but the Ukrainians, some of them did. But now today, when I saw a news report from that's done from the front lines with one newscaster from RT, it showed that basically where there's snipers still present in apartment buildings, and what happened. So apparently now the Geneva War Conventions are being followed because the snipers only shot at armed combatants, not civilians, because there's showed an elderly couple, husband, wife, trying to get back to the home, and the reporter was walking and says, no, he says, you can go, they're not going to shoot at you because they know that you're not combatants. And what's interesting, compared to a few months ago, that's a different scene because many of the people were shot at basically even by Ukraine troops. And this was brought out in the foreign press, not in what I call the managed press. So, to Mr. Buell of Europe, to answer your question, why isn't the narrative being accepted? Because when people can get other points of view and compare what your narrative says, and they find contradictions and hypocrisies in the narrative, why should they believe the narrative? If you really want your narrative to be believed, you're going to have to tell the truth from both sides, or to use an American phrase and an English phrase. If you're the local umpire in a baseball game between two cities, and what happens, you have to do a call third strike in the ninth inning that causes your city to lose baseball game. If you don't have the courage to call that strike, many people are not going to trust you, and they're going to consider you hypocritical. Or to use an English analogy, if you're playing a cricket match between two towns and you're the umpire for one town and you don't call wicket on your hometown, even if it may mean they lose the game, both sides will not trust you because basically you're a dishonest umpire. You're a hypocritical umpire. That's why your narrative is not being listened to. It's not that people are saying you're dishonest. It's just basically saying there's too much contradiction. When they do get a chance to listen to the foreign news, and they do get a chance to listen to foreign news, which does include RT and BBC, Deutsche Welle, and others. So, with the 2D perspective, going to the multi-D perspective. In the multi-D perspective, we are sort of revisiting a point that we thought was solved in the 90s, but apparently it fell apart by 97. Well, in the 90s, the Cold War had ended. When the Cold War ended, there was agreement basically, like, for example, with the unification of Germany. Should the borders be this, or should the borders go back to this? And then Poland squished, or should Poland, and eventually in the 90s it was decided the borders are the borders are the borders. So whatever the border is set in 1990, that's it. It's set. We're not going to have any more border wars or skirmishes. But then in 97, some groups proposed a new theory, and the new theory talked about, well, let's split up Russia into different zones, and let's split up this area into different zones, or or make these areas basically the cheap labor, the cheap colonies that supply basically the advanced societies in that. Well, um, again, like some people call it neoconservatives, neoliberalism, neocolonialism. Well, whatever it's called, people are not dumb enough to be fooled again. I mean, when I look at the foreign press, and especially when I watch things, when I watch foreign press basically from other areas that are considered Slavic areas, when I see the schools like after they've been bombed out, I see some textbooks, and I'm glad to see that that shows junior high school kids actually reading Pushkin, Chekhov, and other writers like that. Because when I was in high school, we also read that too. Although went to an American high school, I was raised in an area of Kenosha, which was a mixture of Russian Orthodox, Italian Catholic, and Polish Catholic. Well, some people say, well, I can understand Russian Orthodox being different, but what's the difference between Polish Catholic and Italian Catholic? Well, there are many Polish Catholics who are Orthodox Catholics, like my grandmother. Every day when she went out in the winter, she always would wear a black fur hat, or in the spring and summer, she'd wear a shapka, which is a black low scarf like that. In Polish, that's called a shapka. And even when I went out, she'd say, Jeka, put on shapka. And what happens, that meant always go out with a hat like that, though. And that's part of Orthodox Catholic. And another thing is basically part of Orthodox Catholic, which is different from Italian Catholic, is in Orthodox Catholic, we fast from basically mid afternoon to Sunday afternoon. So we have a 1 day a 1 day fast. So basically, what we do is a lot of times we make kadunki, and we make meat pierogi. So we'd have pierogi, and then basically that would be the dinner snack, and then basically we wouldn't make any type of a very simple non-prepared breakfast. It's almost like the Jewish Seder, but basically it's a different time scale. But we had a period of fasting too. So basically on Sunday evening, that's when we break the fast. So when I look at the international news, and even the international newscasters, like for example RT, and even some reporters on France 24 understand this about the culture well, I'll say the culture that exists east of Germany, Poland, Hungary, Ukraine, Baltics, Russia, and that. But what happens though, when I look at the Manch culture, they don't understand that, because even when I was watching CBS News, the first days of this thing that happened, they had one report on CBS News. I respect your viewpoint, and I understand that basically maybe she hasn't lived in different areas of the United States where there is sort of a mixture of Russian Orthodox Catholic culture, but she quite missed it. But I think she understands it now. I hope so. But when all the people were coming into Poland, she was surprised. Well, why are these people coming to help these people from the Ukraine coming in Poland? They don't want anything. They don't ask for anything. Some of them take them in the house unconditionally. That's part of the Orthodox and Orthodox Catholic culture. We do help, and sometimes we help too much because it hurts us. But we do help, and we don't help by conditions. We help unconditionally. We don't expect someone to pay us back. We don't expect someone to do a favor. We don't expect if we help someone, we'll run a favor back. No, that's not our way. It's like in Wisconsin. If you get a flat tire, and you're in an area of Wisconsin that's outside Chicago influence, someone will pull over and gladly help you fix the tire, and they'll even drive you to a gas station and have the tire plugged so that basically you can get on your way. Someone says, well, how much do you want for it? Nothing. Why? because it's our way to help. And that's part of the Polish Russian culture that does exist in many parts of the world. We do help, but the problem is when you look at the managed press, and basically, I did watch the commentary on RT about Russophobia and other ethnic phobia. I really don't support this thing about ethnic phobia or Russophobia, because this is going back to the old cartoons where they used to portray Russian women as big blobs, and and basically that type of stereotype. That's what caused us to almost get to a nuclear war. We got to drop these stereotypes. And even when I watched the Capitol Fourth, I was glad to see that they performed Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, even though, quote, it's been banned in Europe and some other places. Tchaikovsky did not cause this conflict. He lived in the late 19th century to the early 20th century. So, and and also it wasn't his ghost either. So, just to set that aside to some extremists. But what we are facing is basically, I discovered a new term today when I was reading different reports on policy and also security issues. Now, this was from a report that was labeled TLP White, which is able to be shared publicly. So that's why I can talk about this. Sometimes there are other things I can't talk about, but it talked about the term acceleralist. Okay, let me just spell it out, because maybe some people may have trouble understanding how I speak. ACCERELATIONIST, acceleralist. And what an acceleralist is a group of extremists, whether they're ethnic extremists, far-right extremists, eco-extremists, aggressive eco-extremists, you get the gist. They insert themselves in a social justice movement. And what they do is they'll go into a protest, they'll go into something else, and they'll exert themselves. And then basically, where the term accelerate comes in is normally with the social justice protest, there's signs, there's people saying, no, I don't believe in this. I think you're wrong. I think, but what the sellers do is basically the sellers go further. They, instead of the people just yelling at each other and holding the signs and waving the signs, what they do is they actually could call things like what happened in Kenosha a few years ago, where basically where Kenosha was almost literally burned down to the ground. And no one has mentioned the use of accelerators, but basically, when I read that report, I sometimes wonder if maybe that's what happened in Kenosha, and that though. But accelerators are the type that take a demonstration and really blow it up into like a war zone, and that's what I'm concerned what we're facing now, because basically, when we have the limited news coverage of the managed news and we don't have the foreign news, some people can still get different channels. Like I can get RT through different sources, and friends in Evanston, Northwestern can as well, like that through common sources. But no, but to our friends in Europe, I guess you guys are blocked even on internet from getting RT and Sputnik. And when England passed a law basically guaranteeing media, I forgot what the term they use, but media clarity. They excluded the news organizations of RT and Sputnik, and however, they didn't exclude news organizations as the Chinese Communist Party news channel, or let's see what else, Al Jazeera, and others. Well, if you're going to have Al Jazeera and others, why won't you allow RT and Sputnik? People are intelligent enough to make their minds like that, though. But this is where the thing about this 2D world ending and the multi-D world starting it's a rough start. It's a rough start. But the thing is, I still am concerned when I watch the international news because of this. In Germany now, they're telling people to be prepared for a very, very cold winter, super cold, because they don't have enough oil and gas reserves. And this is in the summer. they don't have enough reserves even in the summer. And in Paris, and on the French news, I hear that some cities in Paris, even Paris, when September comes, they're going to shut off the street lights early. They're going to shut off some street lights that deemed not necessary to try to save on energy. Good Lord. Um, Paris is a multinational city as other European cities. It's not a country village, and people do not drive like they're in the country when they're in Paris. Many people take, like in many cities, take the speed limit as a recommendation, as my friends from Italy would say. They take the speed. So without city lights, basically, I hope they're prepared for a lot of our fender benders and crashes and rescue calls, because that dog won't hunt, like they say in Texas. That dog won't hunt, and what they mean by that is that plan won't succeed. So basically, although in the 2D world, some of us Americans are considered vulgar, and there's a blip like the Trump bump like of a baby, and sometimes people consider us as little babies. Well, we're not really little babies. There's a reason why we broke away from the European aristocracy thinking over 200 years ago. And part of it was we realized that even the 1D world wasn't working. So basically, that's when the 2D world formed, when the United States became a major country in the 1870s. But now basically the 2D world's changing because basically now we got a raging pandemic with the BA5 in Milwaukee. People have to put on a mask again. Hopefully we don't have to do this thing again with the nanny state. Um, Also, what happens? We have a conflict which could go into a world war, even a nuclear war, and both sides are running into issues about namely what happens. I won't say both sides, but one side is running into issues of morale for its people to continue to fight, because when they take off the uniforms and surrender the civilian clothes, that says something. And when many people who are left behind are listed as missing in action, even though they're dead, with their chevrons taken off and their identifying insignia taken off, that begs the question about um, what type of war is this, or what type of military operation is this by this. In addition, when reporters when reporters from one side can have reporters on the front line and report from the front line, but in the managed press, the reporters can only report basically in back zone sites where maybe the news is filtered or approved before it's allowed to be aired, but they're not allowed to travel with the actual Ukraine troops on the front lines to actually show people what it is like on the front lines from the Ukraine perspective. That begs the question too. So I do think basically with this thing that's going on in Ukraine, like Peter Lavelle says, we got to sit down and talk, and we got to sit down and really talk this time. Um, and we got to make sure when we do talk, everyone attends. To make sure someone that says, "Well, oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I woke up late. I don't want to attend." All of us have graduated from college. We're no longer living on campus. We know what it means to be at a meeting at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock means 9 o'clock means 9 o'clock. And what happens basically, if you can't make that meeting at 9 o'clock, you either better be sick, or you better have a very good explanation, because basically, as a leader and as an adult, people expect you to honor your commitments. Well, in my final thought to everyone going through this, especially our friends in Europe and the Ukraine and in Russia, as well as other parts of the world going through this, even our friends in Africa who have feared that the grain may be that they're not allowed to store grain in a crisis. Basically, keep strong, keep strong, keep strong. Eventually, wise heads will prevail. But we got to communicate with each other. We got to share thoughts and observations with what we see. So keep strong. Don't allow them to put blinders on you. Don't allow them to muzzle what you hear. Don't allow them to muscle what you can say. Even if you have to say it through YouTube, Zoom, Lumbo, Gab, Telegram, say it. Just say it. Well, let me know what you think. As before, I prefer to receive comments via Twitter. So if you wish, Diana1A or Ideas with Diana. And I wish to thank you for listening. And this has been Ideas with Diana for July 18th, 2022.